Many people think that at my age, there are no enemies left. That at 78, it's time to accept, forgive, and forget. I used to think that too. Until I realized that sometimes there are no enemies left, only because their place is taken by their own children. I'm sitting in my living room in New Brighton, going through old photographs. In one of them, Edgar is holding little Lloyd in his arms. Both of them are smiling. I'm standing next to him, slightly off to the side, as if I've accidentally walked into the frame. This photo has always seemed symbolic to me. My husband passed away 5 years ago. A heart attack took him suddenly, leaving no time to say goodbye. 37 years of marriage ended in an instant. Edgar Barrington was not the easiest man to live with, but I loved him despite the challenges. He worked as a financial controller for New Brighton Development, a construction company, for most of his life. A respected man, a good professional. He was not often at home. Work always came first. Edgar had a special relationship with our son. Lloyd literally idolized his father and sought to be like him in everything. When the boy turned 14, Edgar started taking him to the office with him on Saturdays. "Let the boys see how real things are done," he said, and I'd stay home and make their lunch for their return. I put the photos aside and walk over to the window. The third floor overlooks the park. This is the third year I've lived here, in this one-bedroom apartment, since I sold our family home. It had become too big for me alone, and the memories too heavy. After Edgar died, Lloyd became even more distant. Called once every 2 weeks, stopped by once a month, always in a hurry. "Sorry, Mom, work," was the standard phrase he used to justify his absence from my life. He followed in his father's footsteps and took a job with the same company, only as a bookkeeper. Lloyd was always less ambitious than Edgar. I make myself some tea and sit back in my chair. On the table next to me is the wedding invitation, golden paper, ornate script. "We have the honor of inviting you to the marriage celebration of Lloyd Barrington and Meredith Tanner. The wedding's in a week." You'd think I'd be excited, but instead of joy, it's anxiety. I met Meredith a year ago. Lloyd brought her to dinner, introduced her as a special person. Meredith is 32 years old and works as a receptionist in a private dental clinic. Tall, slender, with shoulder-length straight blonde hair and a keen gaze in her brown eyes. She smiled, asked polite questions about my health, but I immediately sensed falseness. There is such a woman's instinct when behind the smile hides a cold calculation. During that first dinner, Meredith asked me in passing if I was going to move to Florida. "It's so nice there for the elderly." When I said that my home was here in New Brighton, she cast a quick glance at Lloyd. There was irritation in that look. After that dinner, I tried to be friendly. I called, inquired about their affairs, offered to help. Meredith always responded dryly, "Thanks, we'll be fine." And then she stopped picking up the phone when I called. I remember the day Lloyd announced the engagement. He stopped by unannounced, stayed less than an hour. He said he and Meredith had decided to get married, and he wanted me to hear it from him in person, not on social media. "I'm happy for you," I said. "Are you sure it's the right choice?" Lloyd tensed. "What do you mean?" "I just want you to be happy. You've been dating less than a year." "Mom, I'm 35 years old. I know what I'm doing." "Of course you do, son. It's just, there's always a just," he interrupted me. "Why don't you just be happy for me?" I didn't go on. My son had always been stubborn, just like his father. Once he'd made up his mind about something, it was impossible to change his mind. A week later, we started discussing the upcoming wedding. Meredith wanted a lavish celebration at the prestigious River Garden Ballroom. This choice surprised me. The hall was expensive, and Lloyd's financial situation left much to be desired. After Edgar's death, I learned that his son had accumulated a lot of credit card debt. Maybe we should do something a little more modest. I cautiously suggested at a family dinner. Meredith immediately cut me off. "We want this day to be special. The man has one wedding in his life." "I understand. I'm just worried about the financial side." "Eunice?" Meredith always addressed me by my first name, never Mom, or at least Mrs. Barrington. "Lloyd and I have it all figured out. Don't worry about our finances." After dinner, when Meredith left, I tried to talk to my son alone. "Lloyd, I can help pay for the wedding. I have savings." No, Mom. We can manage. But you know, Edgar left me a nice sum of money. I want to share it. Lloyd grimaced. Let's not talk about it. Meredith would be offended if she knew we were taking money from you. Why? It's okay to help children. She she has her own ideas about financial independence. I realized this conversation was over. Lloyd always had a way of avoiding unpleasant topics, another trait he inherited from his father. The wedding preparations were in full swing. I offered to help perhaps with the flowers or the menu. Meredith politely but firmly declined. They already had a wedding planner, and everything was under control. I tried not to take offense. After all, it's their day. But when Lloyd called to tell me that they'd decided not to invite my old friends Beverly and Ruth, so as not to inflate the guest list, I felt truly disconnected. But Beverly has known you since you were a child, I objected. And Ruth was your father's best friend. Mom, we're on a tight budget. We only invite the closest people. I can pay for their seats. It's not about money. Meredith wants all the guests to be, in the same age group. I didn't say anything. What can I say? In the same age group is like my friends are dinosaurs who don't belong with the young. One night, 2 weeks before the wedding, the phone rang. Meredith. It was the first time she'd ever called me on her own. Eunice, I have a favor to ask of you. Her voice sounded strained. Lloyd and I were discussing seating arrangements. We'll put you at the table with my friend Kathleen's parents. Okay, I tried to sound neutral. And, she paused. Lloyd said you wanted to make a toast? Yeah, I thought I'd say a few words, as the mother of the groom. You see, we already have a program planned. There will be a toast from my father, from Lloyd's best friend, and from my girlfriend. Adding another toast would mess up the timing. I felt a lump come up in my throat. I understand. Don't worry, I won't interfere with your timing. Thank you for understanding. I could hear the relief in her voice. One more thing. Have you picked out an outfit yet? Yes, I have a beautiful navy blue dress. Dark blue? There was a note of alarm in her voice. Eunice, I'd rather you chose something in beige or pastel colors. Dark blue will contrast too much with our color scheme. I squeezed the tube. Meredith, I wore this dress to the mayor's reception 3 years ago. Edgar said it looked great on me. But that was 3 years ago, she said softly. At the mayor's reception, not my son's wedding. There was a pause. Okay, I said finally. I'll look for something in pastel colors. Oh, that's great, Meredith exclaimed with feigned enthusiasm. I'm sure you'll look great. After that conversation, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I remembered how I had once dreamed of my son's wedding, how I imagined that I would help choose a suit for the groom, advise my daughter-in-law, share my experience. And now I was virtually pushed aside, turning into an inconvenient guest who was invited only out of politeness. The next day I went to the mall. I wandered between the racks with age clothes, choosing something beige, inconspicuous, not breaking the color scheme. The saleswoman, a woman about my age, looked sympathetically when I explained what I was looking for. Your son's wedding? She asked, picking out my dress. Yes. And your daughter-in-law is telling you what to wear? I smiled weakly. She just wants everything to be perfect. Mine used to be like that too, the salesgirl sighed. Now she calls every week asking me to babysit her grandchildren. Lloyd and Meredith don't have plans for kids yet, I said, trying on the pale beige dress. It made me look even paler than I was. They want to buy a house first. That's what they all say. The saleswoman handed me another option, a slightly warmer shade. And then life makes adjustments. I bought the dress the salesgirl recommended. At least it didn't make me look like a ghost. When I showed Meredith the photo, she approved with one word. It'll do. A week before the wedding, Lloyd stopped by my house, alone, without Meredith. He looked tired and nervous. How are the preparations going? I asked, setting a cup of tea in front of him. It's fine. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Meredith is overseeing every detail. It's good to have the bride involved. Yeah, he paused. Mom, I wanted to talk about the wedding day. Meredith is very nervous. She's afraid something's going to go wrong. It's normal. I sat down across from him. All brides are nervous. Yeah, but, he hesitated. She's especially nervous about certain things, like your, involvement. I felt my shoulders tense. My involvement? I thought I'd been deprived of all participation. No toast, no girlfriends, no dress of choice. Mom, don't start. He sighed. I just want the day to go smoothly. No pressure. What stress? Am I creating something? No, but. He lowered his eyes. Meredith thinks you disapprove of our marriage, that you look down on her. What? I was genuinely surprised. I've never given any reason to think that. Perhaps it's not what you say, but how you look. Or the way you sigh when she suggests something. Lloyd, I'm trying to be friendly. I want to have a relationship with your future wife. Then just, take it easy on your wedding day, okay? Don't ask a lot of questions, don't criticize, just smile and be happy for us. I looked at my son and I didn't recognize him. The boy I raised never spoke to me like that. Like I was some kind of problem to be solved. Of course, Lloyd, I said quietly. I'll smile and be happy. What else would you expect from the groom's mother? He left shortly after this conversation, hurrying off to meet the organizer. And I stayed in my quiet apartment, looking at the pictures of the past and thinking about the future, in which it seemed I was assigned the role of an extra. Beige, inconspicuous, not disturbing the overall harmony. 3 days before the wedding, I decided to try again. One last chance to establish a relationship with my future daughter-in-law to make a step forward. After all, we both love Lloyd. Shouldn't that bring us together? I bought a small bouquet of white lilies, not too obtrusive, but festive enough, and went to their house. They were renting a one-bedroom apartment in a new building on the outskirts of New Brighton. The neighborhood was considered up and coming, but so far there were more construction cranes than apartment buildings. As I rang the doorbell, I mentally repeated my prepared speech. It was nothing special, just a little help with the last-minute preparations, maybe some advice from my own experience. Meredith opened the door. She was wearing a homemade suit of expensive velour. Her hair was gathered in a careless bun. She looked tired and irritable. Eunice? She sounded surprised. We didn't have an appointment. Hello, Meredith. I handed her the bouquet. I thought maybe you needed help with the last-minute arrangements. She took the flowers with her fingertips, as if they weren't a bouquet but something unpleasant. Thank you, but we handle everything. We have an organizer. I know, I just thought, Lloyd's not home right now, she interrupted me. He's at a costume fitting. That's okay, I smiled. Maybe I could talk to you. Woman to woman. Meredith hesitated, clearly looking for a reason not to. But then she decided it would be easier to let me in for a few minutes. Okay, come on in. But I don't have much time. I have a meeting with the florist in an hour. The apartment looked like a picture from a magazine. Minimalist design, lots of white, gray, and black. Not a single extra thing, not a single picture on the walls. It didn't look like a young couple's cozy nest. It's a beautiful apartment, I said, sitting down on the edge of the couch. Thank you. Meredith put the bouquet in the vase without much enthusiasm. Would you like something to drink? Tea, coffee? Tea, if that's okay. While she was in the kitchen, I looked around. There were real estate catalogs with bookmarks on the coffee table. So they really are planning on buying a house. Meredith returned with 2 cups. So what did you want to talk about? I just wanted to say again that I'm very happy for you and Lloyd. I began cautiously. And I want us to have a good relationship. She sipped her tea, keeping her eyes on me. Of course, Eunice, we all want that. I think there's been some tension between us, and I'd like to fix it. Meredith set the cup down. What tension? It's fine. Lloyd said that you thought I disapproved of your marriage. Her face froze for a moment, then she smiled. Lloyd is being overdramatic. I merely said that you seemed concerned. I'm only concerned about your well-being. You decided to get married so quickly, and this expensive wedding. You see? She interrupted me. That's exactly what I was talking about. You keep insinuating that we're doing something wrong. No, I'm just. Eunice. Her voice became firm. I realize you're used to taking care of Lloyd, but he's a grown man. We make our own decisions. I took a deep breath. This conversation was not going according to plan. Meredith, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to be a part of your life. And you will be. She smiled again. But the smile didn't touch her eyes. But we need space, you know. A young family needs to build their own relationship without undue influence. Undue influence? I felt a lump in my throat. You think I'm an unnecessary influence? That's not what I meant, she sighed with feigned patience. It's just that sometimes your advice and criticism can be inappropriate. I've never criticized you. Not directly, Meredith agreed. But when you ask Lloyd if he's sure about his choice or suggest a cheaper banquet hall, it comes across as criticism. I clenched my hands in my lap. A wave of resentment and anger was rising inside, but I tried to stay calm. I'm just looking out for both of you, and I know that Lloyd had financial problems after Edgar died. Meredith raised an eyebrow. Financial problems? What do you mean? I hesitated. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Well, the credit card debt. What debts? Her eyes narrowed. Lloyd hadn't told me anything about debts. Oh, damn it. I made a mistake. Maybe I'm wrong. I tried to correct the situation. It was a long time ago, right after Edgar died. I'm sure everything's fine now. Meredith set the cup down and stood up. You know, Eunice, I have to get ready for my meeting with the florist. Thank you for stopping by. The conversation was clearly over. I got up too. Of course, I won't keep you. But Meredith, if you need any help, financial or otherwise, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I want to support you both. She walked me to the door. We appreciate your concern, Eunice, but we can manage on our own. See you at the wedding. The door closed practically in my face. I stood in the empty hallway, feeling completely confused. What had I done wrong? Why did every attempt to get closer to Meredith turn into more alienation? That evening, Lloyd called. I could tell from his tone that something unpleasant had happened. Mom, were you at our house today? Yeah, I came by for a little while. I wanted to offer to help with the preparations. And why did you tell Meredith about my debts? I sighed. Lloyd, it was an accident. I didn't know you hadn't told her. You didn't? His voice got a little higher. What do you think people usually tell their fiancés? About their old debts? I thought you discussed finances before you got married, especially if you're planning on buying a house. Mom, he said slowly, as if explaining to a child. Those debts were paid off a long time ago. But now Meredith is worried I'm hiding something from her. She's been checking my bank statements all night. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble, but maybe it's for the best. You two should be honest with each other before you get married. For the best, he snorted. Meredith now thinks I'm financially irresponsible, and you know what? She thinks you did it on purpose. What? I was shocked. Why would I do that? To sow doubt between us. His voice sounded tired. Mom, I'm begging you, please don't interfere in our relationship. At least until we're married. Lloyd, I wasn't trying to. I have to go, he interrupted me. We have a meeting with the DJ tomorrow. He hung up before I could answer. I sat there clutching the phone, a tear rolling down my cheek. When did my boy become so cold? When did he stop trusting me? The next day, I decided to try to make things right. I called Meredith, but she didn't pick up. I sent an apology text and got no response. Finally, I decided to call the wedding agency and order an extra surprise for the newlyweds, live music during the cocktail hour. It wasn't cheap, but I wanted to show my support for them. An hour later, the agency receptionist called me back. Mrs. Barrington, I'm afraid we can't take your order. Why not? Miss Tanner just called and said that all extras must be cleared with her. She was quite insistent that we couldn't take any orders from you. I felt the blood rush to my face in humiliation. I see. Thank you. That evening, I tried Lloyd again. He didn't answer until the third call. Mom, I'm at the bachelor party. What's going on? Music and laughter in the background. His voice sounded strained. I wanted to apologize to Meredith for talking to her last night, but she's not picking up. She's upset. He sounded impatient. Give her time to cool off. I tried to book you for a surprise wedding, but the agency... Yes, Meredith told me, he interrupted. Mom, we told you not to get involved. I'm not interfering. I wanted to give you a gift. Without consulting us, his voice became harsh. That's meddling. Lloyd, why can't you see that Meredith is turning you against me? She's controlling your every move. There was a pause. When he spoke again, his voice sounded cold. You know, Mother, it's because of statements like that that Meredith thinks you're against our marriage. I'm not against it. I just see what's going on. What's going on? He grinned. That I'm finally happy with a woman who understands and supports me? That I've built a relationship that doesn't have constant reminders of how great my father was and how mediocre I turned out? I gasped. I never said you were mediocre. Not directly, he echoed Meredith's phrase, but it was always between the lines. Lloyd, that's not true. I've always been proud of you. Look, his voice sounded tired. I don't want to fight before the wedding. Let's just, take a break. I'll see you at the ceremony. He disconnected. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, feeling my world crumble. My son, my only child, turning his back on me, all because of a woman who sees me as a threat. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw a messenger with a large envelope. Mrs. Eunice Barrington? Yes, that's me. There's a letter for you. Sign here, please. I signed my name, wondering who could have sent me something with a courier. Inside were documents from Caldwell and Associates. The accompanying letter read, Dear Mrs. Barrington, we are sending you a copy of the deeds for the sale of the property at 28 Oak Street, New Brighton, on behalf of our client, Mr. Lloyd Barrington. I sank down in my chair, unable to believe my eyes. This was our family home. The house where I'd lived for 30 years with Edgar. The house I'd sold to Lloyd after my husband's death for practically a token sum because I couldn't bear the thought of it falling into the wrong hands. And now Lloyd was selling it, without even informing me. The attached documents showed that the buyer was Hampton Development, a construction company, and the amount of the deal was $450,000. The closing was scheduled for the following month. I dialed Lloyd's number with trembling hands. He didn't answer. Then I decided to call the law firm. Caldwell and Associates, how can I help you? Hi, this is Eunice Barrington. I've received the deed to my son's house and, just a moment, I have Mr. Prescott for you. After a few beeps, a man's voice answered. Jeffrey Prescott speaking. Mr. Prescott, I'm Eunice Barrington, Lloyd Barrington's mother. I've just received the sale papers for the house on Oak Street. Yes, Mrs. Barrington, your son instructed me to send you a copy. But why am I only hearing about this now? Why didn't he discuss it with me? Pause. Mrs. Barrington, I understand your concern, but your son is not legally obligated to discuss the sale of his property with you. But this is our family home. I only sold it to Lloyd because he promised to preserve it for future generations. I'm sorry, but I can't comment on the personal arrangements between you and your son. Legally, the sale is perfectly legal. I squeezed the phone. And the buyer? What do they plan to do with the house? As far as I know, Hampton Development plans to demolish the existing structure and erect an apartment building on the lot. This neighborhood is undergoing a lot of development right now. Demolish. They were going to tear down the house that Lloyd's great-grandfather built. The house where part of Edgar's ashes were buried in the rose garden. A house full of family memories. Thanks for the information, I said, and hung up the phone. I sat staring at the documents and felt anger building up inside. How could he do this? How could Lloyd betray a family memory like that? And why did he need almost $500,000? For all I knew, he and Meredith were saving up for a small house in the suburbs that would cost half as much. I dialed my son's number again. This time he answered, Mom, I can't talk right now. I have an important meeting. You're selling our house, I said without preamble. And you didn't even bother to tell me in person. Lloyd sighed. I got your messages. I was going to call you tonight. Tonight? After I get the paperwork from your lawyers? Is this your way of breaking important news? Mom, I didn't want to upset you before the wedding. You didn't want to upset me? My voice was shaking. You're selling the house where your father is buried. The house I gave you for next to nothing because you promised to keep it. Circumstances have changed. His voice sounded distant. Meredith and I need money for a fresh start. What fresh start? What are you talking about? Pause. We're moving to Portland after the wedding. Meredith has a job offer at a big dental practice there. I felt the room start to spin. You're moving? To another state? And again, you didn't bother to tell me about it? We were going to tell you after the honeymoon. It just came up last week. And you said yes? Just to leave your job, your friends. Me? Mom. His voice became hard. I made a decision that's best for my future family, for me and Meredith. What about your current family? Me? Doesn't my opinion mean anything? You're my mother and I love you, but I have to live my life. A life that Meredith dictates? There, he almost screamed. This is exactly why we didn't tell you before. You always make everything so complicated, always blaming Meredith, never giving her a chance. Lloyd, she's turning you against me. Can't you see that? No, Mom. His voice turned icy. You're turning me against her. From the beginning, you didn't accept her. And you know what? She's right. It's time you learned your place. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Know my place. I said it again quietly. Is that what you think of your mother? That's not what I meant, he trailed off. It's just, you have to respect our decisions. Even if those decisions mean selling the family home, moving thousands of miles away without warning, you call that respect, Lloyd? Mom, I gotta go. We'll talk about this later. When? At the wedding? Or after you leave for Portland? I'll call you tomorrow. He clearly wanted to end the conversation. And please don't call Meredith. She's nervous enough about the wedding as it is. He hung up. I remained seated, clutching the house sale papers. It all made sense now. The expensive wedding, the sudden move, and the sale of the house were all links in the same chain. Meredith's plan to isolate Lloyd from his past. From me. I made myself some tea and sat by the window, looking out at the park below. Older people strolled the paths, feeding pigeons, sitting on benches. It was my destiny to become one of them. Forgotten, pushed aside, someone who should know her place. Know your place. Those words echoed in my head. I remembered how Edgar had always said, "Never let others tell you your place, Eunice. You determine it for yourself." My Edgar, strong and determined. What would he say now, seeing his son turn his back on everything we had created together? The morning of the wedding day was clear and cool. I was up early, even though the ceremony wasn't scheduled until 2 in the afternoon. I lay awake all night thinking about the day ahead, about talking to Lloyd, about selling the house. I pulled out of my closet the beige dress Meredith had approved of. It hung there, ironed and ready, reminding me of my situation. The mother of the groom who should sit quietly in the corner and not cause trouble. Well, today would be different. After taking a shower, I carefully styled my hair and applied my makeup. I wanted to look dignified, despite the circumstances. Edgar had always said, "Never show weakness when you're having a difficult conversation." Today was probably the most difficult conversation of my life. I put on the dress, the pearl necklace Edgar had given me for my 30th wedding anniversary, and the low-heeled shoes. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw an older but still elegant woman with a straight back and a determined look. Not someone who would silently tolerate neglect. The cab pulled up at exactly 1 o'clock. I deliberately timed it so I could get there early. I wanted to talk to Lloyd before the ceremony started, while Meredith was busy making final preparations. The River Garden Banquet Hall was located on the riverfront, in an old red brick building. Tall windows, marble columns, crystal chandeliers. Everything breathed luxury and antiquity. Edgar and I had once attended charity balls here, back in the best days of New Brighton development. Now I was coming back in a very different capacity. There were uniformed men at the entrance, staff from the banquet hall and the wedding agency. They were putting up signs, checking lists, laying out programs. I approached a young woman with a tablet who, judging by her badge, was an assistant wedding organizer. "Hi, I'm Eunice Barrington, the mother of the groom." She looked at me without much interest. "Hello, Mrs. Barrington. The guests are not allowed in yet. The ceremony will begin in an hour. I'd like to speak to my son before the ceremony. Is he here yet?" The woman flipped through something on her clipboard. "Mr. Barrington arrived half an hour ago. He's in the groom's room now, but I have no instructions about visitors." "I'm not a visitor. I'm his mother." My voice became firmer. "And I want to talk to him." She looked unsure. "Wait a moment, I'll clarify." She stepped aside and took out her cell phone. I saw her talking to someone, occasionally glancing in my direction. Finally, she returned. I'm sorry, Mrs. Barrington, but Mr. Barrington is busy with the photographer and best man right now. He wanted me to tell you that he'll see you at the ceremony. I felt a wave of indignation rising inside me. Lloyd wouldn't even come out and talk to me. It must have been Meredith's influence. She could see that I was coming early and had warned him. Okay, I said, trying to stay calm. Then I'll wait in the hall. The hall isn't ready yet, the assistant answered quickly. But you can wait in the foyer. There are couches there. I went to the place indicated. The foyer was small, with a few leather couches and coffee tables. Several older people were already sitting there, apparently Meredith's relatives who had also arrived early. Sitting down on the couch, I pulled out my phone and dialed Lloyd's number. It buzzed, but no one answered, so I sent a text. I'm in the lobby. We need to talk before the ceremony. It's important. A few minutes later, a reply came back. Not now, Mom. I have a photo shoot. We'll talk after the ceremony. I squeezed the phone. After the ceremony meant when it's already too late. When he would already be married to the woman who was trying to cut me out of his life. Time dragged agonizingly slow. Gradually, the foyer filled with guests. Young couples, families with children, groups of boisterous friends, all dressed up, smiling, anticipating the festivities. No one noticed the elderly woman in a beige dress sitting in the corner with a tense face. Finally, the doors to the main hall opened and the guests began to make their way inside. I got up and headed that way as well. Standing at the entrance was the same assistant organizer, now with a piece of paper in her hands. Mrs. Barrington, your seat is in the third row on the left, she said, making a mark on her list. Third? I questioned. But I'm the groom's mother. Shouldn't I sit in the front row? She looked confused. That's exactly what I have on the chart. The first row is reserved for the bride's parents and special guests. Special guests. But not for the mother of the groom. I felt a lump come up in my throat. I see, I said dryly and walked into the hall. The ceremony room was decorated with flowers and ribbons in pastel colors. Rows of chairs for the guests, an arch for the newlyweds, a small podium for the master of ceremonies, all looked elegant and expensive. I found my seat in the third row next to an elderly couple who introduced themselves as Meredith's distant relatives. The music started at exactly 2 o'clock. Lloyd walked down the aisle with his best man. He looked tense but solemn in his dark gray suit. Our gazes met for a moment and he gave me a slight nod. No smile, no warmth, just a formal acknowledgement of presence. Then, to the traditional march, Meredith appeared, accompanied by her father. Her dress was impeccable white, with a lace top and bouffant skirt. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. The smile never left her face as she walked down the aisle. But when she passed my row and spotted me, her eyes narrowed for a moment. It lasted only a second, but I caught the expression, a mixture of annoyance and superiority. The ceremony went on as usual. The vows, the exchange of rings, the kiss, just as it should be. I sat up straight, dry-eyed, even though my insides ached. My only son was getting married, and I felt like an extra at this celebration. After the ceremony, the guests moved into the banquet room for cocktail hour. Waiters were serving champagne and hors d'oeuvre, and live music was playing. I took a glass and stepped aside, watching what was happening. The newlyweds were accepting congratulations, passing from one group of guests to another. They hadn't reached me yet. At one point, I noticed that Meredith had separated from Lloyd and walked over to a group of her friends, young women in identical pastel-colored dresses. They were standing not far from me, behind a column, and apparently hadn't noticed my presence. "How do you feel, Mrs. Barrington?" one of her friends asked, raising her glass. Meredith laughed. "It's strange to hear it so far, but pleasant." "What about the original Mrs. Barrington?" another friend asked with a chuckle. "Has she come to terms with the loss of her son?" Meredith lowered her voice, but I could still hear every word. "Oh, Eunice, she's sitting in her corner like we planned, third row away from the cameras. She didn't try to interfere. Of course she did, called every day, offering help, money, anything to get in. But I kept her at a distance." "What about Lloyd? What about Lloyd?" Meredith shrugged. "He's always on my side. I explained to him that his mother was a controlling person who couldn't accept her son growing up. He agreed. So what now? After the honeymoon, you're moving, right? Yeah, to Portland. Away from this neck of the woods and away from Mommy. The house is sold and the papers are signed. Did you tell her? She found out yesterday. Meredith laughed again. Can you imagine her face? How could you sell the family home? She parodied my voice, making it sound senile and shaky. Her friends giggled. Wouldn't she try to move in after you? Absolutely not, Meredith replied confidently. I've already explained to Lloyd that we need space to start our own family. No strangers. Is she really that awful? Meredith paused. It's not that she's awful. It's just old, with old attitudes. You know, the kind of person who thinks a daughter-in-law should be a housewife and have children, not a career woman. And she's always comparing Lloyd to his father, and not in Lloyd's favor. He hates it. I felt the blood rush to my face. It was a lie. A pure, unadulterated lie. I had never compared Lloyd to Edgar in a negative way. And I certainly didn't think a woman shouldn't have a career. I've worked most of my life, and I've worked with my family. I feel a little sorry for her, Meredith continued. An old, lonely woman clinging to the past. But I'm not going to let her ruin our future. You're a real predator, Meredith, laughed one of her friends. Poor Lloyd didn't even realize he was under her thumb. He's happy, Meredith said. And that's all that matters. Well, let's go to the hall. Soon the banquet will begin. They left, and I stood there shocked by what I'd heard. So this is how Meredith pictured me to her friends, like an old controlling mom that they should stay away from? And Lloyd, did he really believe that? I finished my champagne in one gulp and headed for the banquet hall. I was seething with anger and resentment, but I decided not to make a scene, at least not right away. I needed to talk to Lloyd alone first. Maybe all was not lost. The banquet hall was even more lavish than the ceremonial one. Round tables covered with snow-white tablecloths, floral arrangements, flickering candles, crystal glasses. Everything breathed richness and elegance. I found my card on a table in the far corner of the room, next to some elderly relatives of Meredith's I didn't know. The newlyweds were seated at the center table with Meredith's parents and best man. The first toast was given by the bride's father's standard words about the happiness of the young people and the joy of being related to the Barrington family. He made no mention of me, as if Lloyd had come into the world on his own. During dinner, I tried to find a moment to approach Lloyd, but he was constantly surrounded by people. Meredith never took a step away from him, holding his hand and smiling at the guests. The perfect couple, the perfect wedding. Finally, when the dancing started, I noticed that Lloyd had retreated to the bar alone. Meredith was chatting with the photographer at that moment. This was my chance. I walked over to my son, trying to look calm. Lloyd, can I talk to you for a minute? He turned around, a look of concern in his eyes. Mom? Is something wrong? We need to talk. Alone. He looked around, as if searching Meredith's eyes. Now's not a good time. When will it be a good time? After you leave for Portland? Lloyd sighed. Okay, but just quickly. Meredith is waiting for me to dance with the guests. We stepped aside toward the window, away from the bulk of the guests. I heard Meredith talking to her friends. I began without preamble. She said terrible things about me. Lying things. Lloyd tensed. What do you mean? She said that I'm constantly comparing you to your father, and not in your favor. That I'm a controlling mother who can't let her son go. That I'm against career women. Mom. That's a lie, Lloyd. I never said any of those things. I was always proud of you, always supportive. Meredith was just sharing her experiences. His voice sounded uncertain. Maybe you didn't mean for it to sound like that, but I didn't? I felt my voice rising. Lloyd, she's manipulating you. She's turning you against me to isolate you. You see? He shook his head. You're blaming her again. You're not giving her a chance again. What chance? She's planning to take you to another city, to sell the house where your father is buried. It was a joint decision, his voice hardened. We decided together to start a new life in Portland. After she put the idea in your head, Lloyd, don't you see what's going on? At that moment, Meredith walked up to us. Her smile instantly disappeared when she saw the look on Lloyd's face. "What's going on?" she asked, taking him under her arm. "Darling, we're expected for the dance. Your mother is giving her opinion of our plans," Lloyd answered without looking at me. Meredith turned to me, and her eyes narrowed. "Eunice, we agreed not to bring this up today. This is our day." "We didn't agree on anything," I countered. "And I have the right to talk to my own son." "Of course you do." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold. "But not now. We have guests waiting." "Meredith, I heard you talking to your friends," I said flatly. "I heard what you said about me." She lost her composure for a moment, but quickly regained her smile. "I don't know what you mean, Eunice. Perhaps you imagined it." "I wasn't imagining it. You called me a controlling old mother. You laughed at me. You lied about how I feel about a woman's career." "Mom, stop it," Lloyd intervened. "You're exaggerating." "I'm exaggerating?" I turned to him. "Lloyd, she's planning to take you away from me. She sold the house where—" "It's our house," Meredith interrupted, no longer hiding her irritation. "And our decision. And you—" She stopped talking, seeing that several of the guests had turned in our direction, attracted by the raised voices. "Eunice," Meredith lowered her voice, but there was steel in it. "I realize this is difficult for you, but this is our day. Please don't ruin it." "I'm not trying to ruin your day," I replied. "I'm trying to open my son's eyes to what's going on." "Nothing is going on!" Meredith almost shouted, losing her temper. "Except that you can't accept that your son is grown up and living his own life." By now, many of the guests were looking in our direction. The music continued to play, but a zone of tense silence had formed in our corner of the room. "Meredith," I tried to speak calmly, "I just want my son to be happy, but I can see that you're trying to distance him from me, from his roots. And I don't understand why." "Why?" She laughed a harsh, unpleasant laugh. "Maybe because every time we see each other, you try to interfere with our decisions? Maybe because you look at me as unworthy of your precious son?" "That's not true." "It is." She raised her voice. "You've been against us from the beginning, against me." "Meredith, please." Lloyd put his hand on her shoulder. "Let's not make a scene." "A scene?" She turned to him. "Your mother's the one making a scene, on our wedding day." By now, the music had died down, and all the guests were looking in our direction. Meredith's parents rose from their seats and walked toward us. "Lloyd," I looked at my son. "Please, let's talk privately. Just 5 minutes." "Mom, not now." His voice sounded tired. "Let's discuss everything after the honeymoon." "When will you be getting ready to move in? When everything will be decided?" "It's already decided," Meredith interjected. "And you know what, Eunice? I'm not going to pretend anymore. You're a selfish, controlling woman who can't handle her son living his own life. You ruin our day with your accusations and your tantrums, and I won't take it anymore." She raised her voice for all to hear. "Get out! You're ruining everything! You're not wanted here!" There was dead silence in the room. All the guests froze, staring at us. I stood there shocked by the outburst. But what shocked me even more was that Lloyd didn't say a word in my defense. He stood next to Meredith, looking down at the floor, an awkward smile on his face. The smile of a man who just wants the unpleasant moment to be over soon. Meredith's father walked over to us. "What's going on here?" "Lloyd's mom is causing trouble," Meredith quickly replied, with exaggerated emotion. "On our wedding day, Mrs. Barrington." Meredith's father turned to me. "Perhaps you'd better leave if you're upset. We can call you a cab." I looked at them all. Meredith with her feigned indignation, her father with his condescending concern, the guests with their curious looks. And Lloyd, my son, who still hadn't looked up, hadn't spoken a word in my defense. In that moment, something broke inside me. Pride, hope, a mother's love. I don't know. But I felt a strange calmness, as if all my emotions had suddenly turned off. I straightened up, squared my shoulders, and said quietly, but clearly, "Don't worry about the cab. I'm leaving now." Turning around, I headed for the exit. My back straight, my head held high, not looking back, not showing the tears that stung my eyes. Behind me, I heard Meredith speak loudly. "Let's keep the party going. DJ music." And as the talking, the laughter, the sounds of merriment gradually resumed. In the dressing room, I picked up my coat and went outside. The evening was chilly, with clouds covering the sky. I stood on the steps of the river garden, not knowing where to go or what to do. 40 years ago, when I'd married Edgar, I dreamed of one day dancing at my son's wedding, how proud I would be of him, how I would welcome his chosen one into the family, how happy our extended family would be. But instead, I stood alone on a cold street, kicked out of my own son's wedding, who didn't even try to stand up for me, who just stood there smiling while his wife publicly humiliated his mother. I took a deep breath and started slowly down the steps. A decision was maturing inside. A firm, final decision. I wasn't going to take this attitude anymore. Not from Meredith, not from Lloyd. They had made their choices. Now it was time for mine. The cab driver asked where to take me, and I gave him my address, mechanically, without thinking. On the way home, I didn't cry. Inside, there was only emptiness and a strange numbness. Maybe shock? I don't know. All I know is that I was no longer in pain. The pain was gone, replaced by something else, a cold, crystal clear determination. At home, the first thing I did was take off my beige dress and throw it in the trash. Never again would I adjust to someone else's expectations. I changed into my usual clothes, made some tea, and sat down in a chair. An old photo album lay on the coffee table in front of me. I opened it and flipped through the pages. Edgar as a young man, tall, with a straight back and a confident look. Edgar holding little Lloyd in his arms. Edgar at a New Brighton development corporate party receiving an award for 30 years of distinguished service. My husband was no saint. He was tough, demanding, sometimes even callous. But he was an honest man. At least that's what I thought for most of our life together. Until one day, a year before he died, I found documents that made me doubt it. I didn't make a scene then. Edgar was already sick, and I didn't want to add to his stress. But I kept those papers. Just in case, I told myself at the time, not knowing what kind of case I meant. Now I knew. I got up and walked over to the bookcase in the corner of the living room. There was a small hidden niche behind a row of old encyclopedias that no one ever pulled out. Edgar had made it years ago when we first moved into this apartment. "For the most precious things, Eunice," he said then. Ironically, it now held documents that compromised him. I pulled out a yellowed folder and returned to the desk. Inside were copies of contracts, internal reports, and emails, all related to the Sunset Hills housing project that New Brighton Development had built 10 years ago. The project was a flagship for the company, 12 premium apartment buildings on the lakefront. But problems arose during the construction process. In order to meet the deadline and budget, the company's management decided to use cheaper materials than were specified in the project documentation. Edgar, as the financial controller, knew about this. Moreover, he personally signed the amended estimates and then participated in the falsification of accounts. I flipped through the documents, remembering how I discovered them. Edgar had been in the hospital, and I'd been going through his desk looking for insurance documents, and I'd come across this folder. At first, I didn't understand what was in it, but then I realized what was in it, and I was shocked. My principled, honest Edgar was complicit in the deception. When I asked him about it, carefully not accusing, he said he had no choice. "Everybody did it, Eunice. If I had refused, I would have just been fired, and we needed the money for Lloyd's schooling." I accepted that explanation, or I convinced myself I did. I put the papers away and tried to forget about them, and now they could serve another purpose. New Brighton Development still existed. Not as big as it used to be, but still a respected construction company in the city. And Lloyd worked there in the finance department. Not as high up as Edgar, but he was doing quite well. I knew that if those documents got out, the company would be under serious scrutiny. A scandal, possibly heavy fines. And Lloyd would probably be fired after all. The son of a man who'd been involved in fraud was unlikely to be trusted by management. But was that fair? Lloyd had nothing to do with those frauds. He was still in college at the time. It got me thinking, fairness? What is it exactly? Is it fair what Lloyd and Meredith did to me? Was it fair that I'd been publicly humiliated at my own son's wedding and he hadn't even stood up for me? No, it wasn't about fairness. It was about consequences. Every action has consequences. Lloyd made his choice. Now it was time to find out what those consequences would be. I put the folder aside and picked up my phone. It was time to activate Edgar's old connections. The first call I made was to Howard Fitz, my husband's former coworker. Howard was now retired but kept in touch with former employees of the company. Howard? It's Eunice Barrington. Eunice! I could hear the surprise in his voice. It's been ages. How are you? Not bad, thank you. Lloyd got married today. He did? Congratulations. Edgar would have been happy. I ignored that remark. Howard, I need your help. Information. What kind of information? Who's in charge of auditing construction companies at the IRS right now? Pause. Eunice, why are you doing this? Just tell me if you know. He hesitated for a moment, but then he answered. From what I hear, it's a special department run by Marcus Chen. He's a pretty tough guy, likes high-profile cases. What happened? Nothing much. Just gathering information. Does this have anything to do with Lloyd? Is he having problems at the company? No. He's fine. We exchanged a few more sentences and I ended the conversation. That was enough information to get us started. The next call was to Janet Reeves, Edgar's former secretary. She was still working for the company, now in an administrative position. Janet? Good evening. This is Eunice Barrington. Mrs. Barrington, what a surprise. How are you? Fine, thank you. Janet, I have a small favor to ask of you. Could you tell me who's in charge of documentation on the old projects? Let me see. Deborah Lynch is in charge of the archives. And what exactly are you interested in? The Sunset Hills project. Edgar mentioned before he died that there were some inconsistencies in the documentation. Oh, Janet lowered her voice. I shouldn't be talking about this, but the project had come up again recently. The residents of the complex have filed a class action suit over foundation problems. The company is trying to keep it quiet. I see. I tried to sound disinterested. Is Lloyd involved in this? No. He's just working on the current projects. But the atmosphere is tense. Everyone's worried that if it goes to court, other issues might come up. Thank you, Janet. That's very helpful information. After that conversation, I knew I had to act quickly. If the company was already under threat of a lawsuit, additional information about fraud from 10 years ago could be the last straw. I sat down at my computer and began drafting an anonymous letter. Not an email, a real one on paper. Edgar had always said that emails were traceable and that no one took regular letters seriously these days. That's why they are ideal for anonymous communications. In the letter, I summarized the essence of the case. Substitution of materials, falsification of accounts, tax evasion. No specific names, just facts and references to documents, copies of which I attached. I addressed the letter to Marcus Chen personally, to the tax office. When I finished, I reread the text. Cold, businesslike, unemotional. Just what I needed. Tomorrow, I'd send it by regular mail, no return address. But it wasn't enough. Hitting Lloyd's job was only part of the plan. Meredith had to be dealt with too. I opened a new tab on my browser and began searching for information about the clinic where she worked. Bright Smile Dental is a private dental practice with a good reputation in town. The clinic's website had a page of patient testimonials, almost all positive. In the Our Team section, I found a picture of Meredith with a brief description. Meredith Tanner, administrator, responsible for the comfort of our patients and the impeccable organization of the clinic. I grinned. Impeccable organization. Well, we'll see how impeccable it remains after a little intervention. The next day, I got up early. First thing I did was go to the post office and send an anonymous letter to the IRS. Then I went to the nearest internet cafe. It would be unwise to send emails from my home computer. After creating a temporary email address, I wrote an email to Bright Smile Dental. I introduced myself as a patient who had recently visited the clinic and was extremely dissatisfied with the service, especially the receptionist, Meredith Tanner. She was rude, kept me waiting, mixed up my paperwork, and ended up billing me for services I did not receive. After sending that email, I immediately created another temporary address and wrote a similar complaint, but with different details. Then another one, and then another. By the end of the day, I had sent 5 complaints from different addresses, each with specific but different complaints about Meredith's work. Then I registered on several review sites and posted negative comments about the clinic, emphasizing the incompetence of the receptionist. Terrible organization of work, confusion with the record, incorrectly executed insurance documents. Such phrases should have alerted the management of the clinic. But even that wasn't enough. Back home, I called the clinic and made an appointment under an assumed name. 2 days later, wearing dark glasses and a scarf, I showed up for that appointment. Meredith was sitting at the receptionist's desk, wearing a medical gown over an elegant dress. She looked tired. Apparently, the honeymoon had been postponed because of work commitments, or because they needed to urgently look for a new house to buy. "Good afternoon," I said, changing my voice. "I have an appointment for 2:30, Mrs. Smith." Meredith smiled a professional smile. "Let me check. Yes, I see you in the system. Please fill out this form." She handed me a standardized form for new patients. I filled it out with fictitious information and handed it back. "Thank you." Meredith took a quick look at the form. "Dr. Green will see you in a few minutes. Have a seat." I sat down in the waiting area and began to observe. Meredith was working efficiently, answering phones, registering patients, filling out some paperwork. Nothing that could be called incompetent, but that didn't matter to me. What did matter was that the clinic management would get a lot of complaints about her. And even if they investigate and don't find any real problems, the mere fact of the complaints will make them wary, and a wary management is halfway to being fired. When I was invited into the office, I feigned a sudden ailment and asked to reschedule my appointment for another day. Meredith agreed, offering several date options. I chose the most distant one and left, knowing I would never make that appointment. The last item on my plan was the house that Lloyd and Meredith had dreamed of. I knew they were planning to buy a property in Portland, but which one? That's where chance came in. In my mailbox, I found a flyer from Portland Homes Real Estate, the kind of spam I usually tossed out without reading. But now it was a lead. I called the agency and identified myself as Lloyd Barrington's mother. After a few conversations, I was able to find out that my son and his wife were interested in a house in Silver Lake, and even learned the name of their realtor, Rebecca Anderson. The next day, I took the bus to Portland with the firm intention of derailing the purchase of this house. The meeting with Rebecca Anderson was tense. I offered her $10,000 to help me make an anonymous down payment on the house. When she declined, calling it a bribe, I changed tactics and asked to set up a meeting with the sellers of the house directly. Martha and Robert Thompson, the elderly couple selling the house, were more cooperative. I told them the story that there was an industrial facility planned for Silver Lake that would significantly reduce the value of the property. I offered them $20,000 to back out of the deal with Lloyd and Meredith. After some hesitation, they agreed. Money solved everything. They promised to tell my son and his wife that they had changed their minds about selling the house because they had decided to leave it to their children. Returning to New Brighton, I felt a strange satisfaction. 3 blows, to Lloyd's job, to Meredith's job, and to their plans for a new house, were going to completely destroy their perfect new life. And all without a single direct contact on my part. They wouldn't even know it was me behind their failures. It's been 2 weeks since I returned from Portland. 2 quiet weeks filled with anticipation. I didn't take any extra steps, just waited for the mechanism I had set in motion to start working. I read books, watched TV, went to the park. From the outside, it might have looked like I was leading the normal life of an older woman, recovering from the wedding of her only son. But inside, I was like a taut string, waiting for the first results of my work. It didn't take long. Wednesday morning, the phone rang. Howard Fitz, Edgar's former colleague. "Eunice, did you hear the news?" "What news?" I tried to keep my voice neutral. "New Brighton Development's been hit with a tax audit. It's a full-court press. They're reviewing all the paperwork on the Sunset Hills project." "Really?" I acted surprised. "Why would I be surprised?" "They say someone anonymously leaked information about fraudulent materials and accounting. The tax authorities have copies of internal documents." "How interesting." I paused. "What about Lloyd? He works there." "That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about." Howard's voice grew serious. "Lloyd could be under attack. Not directly, of course. He wasn't working for the company yet, but as Edgar's son. You understand." "I do," I sighed. "What do you suggest?" Maybe you could talk to him, warn him, tell him to take a vacation until things settle down? I'm afraid that's not possible, I said so firmly that Howard was surprised to find himself silent. Lloyd and I are not on the best of terms right now, but thank you for the information, Howard. I allowed myself a small smile after the conversation. The first part of the plan was working. 3 days later came a letter from Janet Reeves, a short one, obviously written in a hurry. Mrs. Barrington, I'm sorry to bother you. I think you should know that the company's tax audit is gaining momentum. Lloyd has been suspended from work, formally on vacation, but everyone realizes that it could end in dismissal. Rumor has it that the auditors are particularly interested in the period when Mr. Barrington worked. So Lloyd had already been suspended, faster than I'd expected. I folded the letter and put it away in my desk drawer. I had to move on. The next day, I went to the supermarket on the other side of town. Why drive so far? Because Mrs. Collins, the wife of the owner of Bright Smile Dental, often shopped there. I figured it out from social media. Mrs. Collins liked to tag geolocations to her photos. I was deliberately slow picking fruit at a nearby counter when she appeared. A tall, gaunt woman in her mid-50s. I knew her by sight. I'd seen her in the clinic's Instagram photos when I'd been gathering information on Meredith. Excuse me, I addressed her with a polite smile. You wouldn't happen to be Mrs. Collins, would you? Dr. Collins' wife from Bright Smile Dental. She turned to me, slightly surprised. Yes, that's me. And you are… Oh, I'm not a patient, I shook my head. I've just seen pictures of you at the clinic. I was there recently with a friend. Oh, I see, she relaxed. I hope your friend was satisfied with the treatment? The treatment, yes, I paused meaningfully. But the service, Mrs. Collins frowned. Is something wrong? Well, I don't want to let anyone down, I lowered my voice. But your receptionist, that young woman, Meredith, I think, she was a little inattentive. In what way? She mixed up the appointments, kept my friend waiting when she had an appointment, and then billed for services that weren't rendered. That's a very serious charge. Mrs. Collins looked worried. Did your friend leave a complaint? I don't know. I shrugged my shoulders. But I've heard other patients complain about her too. Apparently, it's not an isolated incident. Thank you for telling me. Mrs. Collins pressed her lips together. I'll be sure to talk to my husband about it. Please don't mention me. I made a frightened face. I don't want to cause trouble. Of course, don't worry. She nodded and quickly finished picking out the fruit. I watched her hurriedly walk away, pulling out her cell phone. The seed had been sown. If the clinic already had complaints about Meredith, and I was sure my anonymous emails had reached their destination, this conversation could be the last straw. A week after this chance encounter, I walked by Bright Smile Dental. There was an unfamiliar young woman sitting at the receptionist's desk. Meredith was nowhere to be seen. I turned to the new employee. Good afternoon. I wanted to make an appointment, but I usually communicate with Meredith. Isn't she working today? Meredith no longer works at our clinic, the girl replied with a professional smile. I can help you with the appointment. Oh, I acted surprised. She quit? I can't discuss personnel issues. The girl continued to smile, but something wary flashed in her eyes. So you want to make an appointment? No, thank you. I shook my head. I'll come back another time. As I walked out of the clinic, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Meredith was fired. The second part of the plan had worked too. What about the third part? The house in Portland? I didn't have direct access to that information, but I could guess that the Thompsons had kept their word. $20,000 is a serious incentive. A few days later, I received a call from a former neighbor at the Oak Street house, Eleanor Pratt. We maintained a formal relationship, occasionally exchanging holiday greeting cards. Eunice, dear, how are you? It's been a long time. Hello, Eleanor. I'm fine, thank you. I'm calling because I saw your son today. He looked, upset. I was tense. Really? Where did you see him? Outside your old house. He stood by the fence and just stared at the house. Then he got in his car and drove away. I wanted to go over, but I didn't have time. I see. I paused. Thank you for telling me. Is he okay? I heard there was some trouble at his company. Yeah, tax audit. I sighed. But I'm sure things will get better. After the conversation, I wondered, Lloyd at the old house, watching it from afar. It was unexpected and interesting. Maybe he was starting to realize what he'd lost. It's been a month. I purposefully avoided any contact with Lloyd and Meredith, but kept a close eye on developments through mutual acquaintances and rumors that circulated in New Brighton. And there were a lot of rumors. Howard reported that Lloyd had been fired from New Brighton Development. Officially, downsizing. Unofficially, because his name raised too many questions for the tax inspectors. The company was facing a heavy fine and couldn't risk it. From Janet, I learned that Lloyd tried to get a job in other construction companies in the city, but without success. The scandal with the tax audit became known in narrow circles, and no one wanted to get involved with the son of Edgar Barrington. There were rumors about Meredith, too. One of her acquaintances saw her in the supermarket. She looked gaunt and depressed. Another mutual friend who worked in the medical community said that Meredith tried to get a job at other dental clinics, but was rejected everywhere. It turns out that Dr. Collins made sure that word of her incompetence spread among his colleagues. And then I saw an ad in the local paper. Car for sale, Volkswagen Jetta, 2 years old, 30,000 miles. Urgent, inexpensive, and Lloyd's phone number. They were selling the car, so the financial problems had already started. I felt no pity, just the cold satisfaction that my plan was working. Every action has consequences. They'd made their choice, now they were reaping the rewards. Another 2 weeks later, I happened to meet Martha Jenkins, Lloyd's schoolteacher, at the local library. Eunice, it's been a long time, how are you? Not bad, Martha, and you? Fine, thank you. Did you hear Lloyd got married? Congratulations. Thank you, I smiled a polite smile. I saw him the other day, Martha continued. He and his wife moved to Pine Hill. They're renting an apartment there. I tried not to show my surprise. Pine Hill was one of the worst neighborhoods in New Brighton. High crime rate, shabby buildings, cheap housing, the kind of place people only moved to when they were desperate. Really? I paused. I thought they were going to Portland. Apparently there's been a change of plans, Martha shrugged. You know, I'm a little worried. Lloyd didn't look. Not so good. Slumped, tired. Maybe he's stressed out at work, I suggested, knowing he didn't have a job anymore. Probably, Martha nodded. Anyway, tell him I said hi if you see him. I will. So, Pine Hill, from affluent middle class to a rented apartment in a rough neighborhood in just a couple of months. How quickly circumstances can change. I decided to verify the information in person. The next day, I took a cab and drove to Pine Hill. I asked the driver to stop a couple blocks from the address I'd gotten through a realtor friend, and then I walked the rest of the way. The neighborhood looked exactly as I'd expected. Dilapidated apartment buildings, graffiti on the walls, trash on the sidewalks. The house where Lloyd and Meredith now lived was a 5-story brick building with peeling plaster. A far cry from the luxurious dreams of owning my own home in an upscale Portland neighborhood. I took a position in a small cafe across the street, where I could see the entrance to the house. Sat there for about an hour, sipping cheap coffee, until I saw them. They came out of the house together. Lloyd, in a wrinkled shirt and old jeans with a faded look. Meredith, in a simple dress without the usual gloss. They didn't speak to each other, just walked side by side looking underfoot. Two figures radiating weariness and defeat. I watched them through the cafe window and there was not a shred of regret inside. Only satisfaction that justice, albeit in my mind, had been served. They turned the corner and were out of sight. I finished my coffee, left a tip, and left the cafe. Mission accomplished. I could go home. Another 2 weeks passed. I gradually began to detach myself from everything that connected me to my past life. I stopped talking to Edgar's former co-workers, canceled my subscription to the local newspaper, and left the house less often. I was getting ready for a new phase. And then the letter arrived. A plain white envelope with my name and address written in familiar handwriting. Lloyd's handwriting. I stared at the envelope for a long time, hesitating to open it. What could he be writing to me? An apology? A request for help? Accusations? Finally, I took the scissors and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a doubled folded piece of paper. I unfolded it and began to read. Mom, I know we haven't spoken since that day, since the wedding. I understand why you've been avoiding contact with me, and I guess I deserve it. The last few months have been, difficult. I lost my job because of the IRS audit. Meredith got fired too. We couldn't buy a house in Portland because the sellers suddenly changed their minds. Now we're renting an apartment in Pine Hill, which is all we can afford. I'm not going to ask you for money. I know you'd say no, and I understand why. But I want to ask you for something else. A conversation. Just a conversation. Maybe over a cup of tea in a neutral place. Meredith is out of town looking for a job. We could get together, like we used to. Please, Mom, I made a mistake. A lot of mistakes. And I want to try to make it right. Your son, Lloyd. I reread the letter twice. Then I folded it slowly and returned it to the envelope. I stood up, walked over to the fireplace, and threw the envelope into the fire. I watched the flames devour the paper, turning Lloyd's words to ash. It's too late, son. Too late. The next day, I called the real estate agency and set up an appointment with a realtor. It was time to sell the condo in New Brighton. I'd already picked out a new place, a small coastal town 2 states away. A quiet, peaceful place where no one knew Eunice Barrington or her history. The selling process took 3 weeks. I didn't rush, but I didn't stall. I methodically packed, sorted through the little things I had accumulated over the years, threw away what I didn't need. With each box, each bag of discarded junk, I felt myself freeing myself from the past. Lloyd's photos in the trash, his gifts to the charity store, memories of him, lock deep inside and throw away the key. The day I left, I walked around the empty apartment one last time. Bare walls, empty cupboards, the echo of footsteps. Nothing reminded me that a family had once lived here, that there was life here. I closed the door, gave the keys to the new owners, and got into a cab that would take me to the bus station. When the car started, I didn't look back. There was no point in looking back. On the bus, looking out the window at the passing scenery, I thought about what I was leaving behind. Not just the city, not just the apartment. I was leaving behind my old identity, Eunice Barrington, Lloyd's mother, Edgar's widow. A woman betrayed by the people closest to her. In this new town, I'll just be Eunice. An older woman with an independent character and a life of her own. No commitments, no expectations, no disappointments. As the bus crossed the state line, I felt something inside finally let go. Revenge had been served. Justice had been served. Now I could move on, start a new life, without looking back.